episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
And also by the Pelvic Health Professionals membership site. This is where healthcare professionals from all modalities, yoga teachers to PTs to movement educators to doctors and NDs, this is where they all come together, collaborate, and learn about all things pelvic health. In the Pelvic Health Professionals membership site, there's an up-to-date library of resources, an online private group, monthly Q&A calls, and access to amazing pelvic health experts from around the world. To find out more, visit pelvichealthprofessionals.com. Welcome to episode 126 of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow, a mother of three, a yoga teacher, and a trainer and consultant who works for yoga teachers. And this podcast was created for you, dear yoga teacher, so you can connect to information and inspiration every single week and feel supported as you tour back and forth to classes, as you plan your workshops, as you do all of the things that a yoga teacher entrepreneur does. Today's episode deals with a topic that impacts so many of us and our students: body image and making peace with the bodies we have. According to eating disorder statistics estimated by the National Eating Disorder Association, in the USA, up to 30 million people suffer from an eating disorder, such as anorexia, bulimia, or binge eating disorder. Worldwide, the figure is closer to 70 million sufferers. Yoga is not a cure, and it's not a replacement for traditional forms of support and therapy, but it can be a powerful tool to navigate the daily challenges of recovery from eating disorders. Also, yoga can help people accept their bodies, which is why it is so important for us to be in discussion with this about how to hold space for everyone in our yoga classes and to be aware of what the cues we are giving to our students are. Jennifer Kreatsoulas, author of Body Mindful Yoga, joins me today to dive into this important topic. And you're going to hear, just like most episodes, I am learning so much from Jennifer as we're talking about my own cues as well. Jennifer reveals her own journey with an eating disorder and how that inspired her work in the area of helping people who struggle with their bodies through yoga. We talk about what words and cues can be triggering and some alternatives you can use instead, as well as the general language in our culture around food, fitness, and fashion. This is such an important episode about being mindful of our bodies in yoga and creating an affirming relationship with our bodies through yoga. And I can't wait to share it with you. All of our show notes and the links are ready for you at theconnectedyogateacher.com/126. Before we dive into this interview with Jennifer today, I want to take a moment to share a very big thank you to Kathy Mitchell. Kathy was one of my very first yoga students long time ago when I taught in a tiny little schoolhouse in a town that I don't think it even has a sign anymore. And that's back when I was teaching Kundalini Yoga. I was a brand new teacher. And I just want to say a huge shout out of thanks to Kathy Mitchell for all of her support through the years. Kathy also left us a review saying, "This is my go-to site to find out what is truly going on in the yoga teacher world. Informative posts, often about unique challenges, and people are very civil." Thank you so much, Kathy. It's great to hear that our Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group is there and supporting you. And yes, people are very civil and very supportive. So if you aren't in there yet, go to our homepage, go to theconnectedyogateacher.com, and you can see the join button right on our homepage. It means so much when you take the time to leave a review. So if you have not done that yet through iTunes or on our Facebook page, please reach out and do that. I like to read all of them on the podcast, and it really is a way for you to say thank you and to let other people know what you think of the podcast. Before we meet Jennifer today, let's hear our hot tip of the week from the team at Schedulicity.
Hey Connected Yoga Teachers, this is Scotty with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Class client alerts can help make sure nothing goes overlooked, whether it's unresolved billing, unsigned waivers, or other missing information that can easily be forgotten in the hustle and bustle of a busy class. If you have multiple yoga teachers working at your studio, this is a perfect way to make sure everyone is up to date and on the same page. Your online client files will stay more organized than any filing cabinet, giving you a greater peace of mind and more control over your time and space.
Okay, connected yoga teachers, let's dive in so that you can get to hear all of this goodness from Jennifer. Jennifer Kreatsoulas is a certified yoga therapist specializing in eating disorders and body image. She is an inspirational speaker and the author, as I said before, of Body Mindful Yoga. Create a powerful and affirming relationship with your body. This is a beautiful book. Maybe you want to purchase it for yourself, or maybe you know a friend who might like it. What an amazing thing for a book club, for a yoga group. I can just think of so many reasons why to read this. Jennifer appeared on Fox 29 News and has been featured in the Huffington Post, Real Woman magazine, and many others. Jennifer talks about today how for over 20 years she struggled with anorexia, and yoga was always an essential tool that facilitated a great deal of her healing. After her eating disorder relapse a few years ago, Jennifer not only rediscovered her yoga practice, but also returned to teaching yoga and launched Yoga for Eating Disorders. Because of her personal experience with an eating disorder, Jennifer is extremely passionate about helping others who also are struggling. Jennifer provides yoga therapy online and in person at Yoga Life Institute in Wayne, Pennsylvania, and leads yoga therapy groups at Montanito Eating Disorder Center of Philadelphia. She teaches workshops, retreats, and specialized trainings for clinicians, professionals, and yoga teachers. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Jennifer. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
I am really excited that we get to talk with you today. One, because I just saw your book in the library this week, and I've been following a lot of your posts as well online. So before we dive into our topic, tell us who you are, where you are, and what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm Jennifer Kreatsoulas, and I am a yoga therapist. I specialize in eating disorders and body image. I've been on my own healing journey for over 20 years from eating disorder, and now have the really unique and beautiful blessing of giving back in this way. I'm certified by the International Association of Yoga Therapists. So I have over 1,000 hours of training, and my whole life changed once I did that training. It just opened me up to what yoga is with a capital Y, right? And really propelled my healing to new levels. And I've taken everything I've learned there and now have built a yoga therapy practice specifically for others in recovery. And I support them through the practices and philosophies and tools of yoga as they travel on their healing journeys. I'm also a mom. I have 2 little girls. They're 5 and 7, and we live outside of Philadelphia.
Nice. Also, you're a busy mom as well. When did you become a yoga teacher?
I became a yoga teacher in 2002.
Okay. So
Yes.
You've been teaching for a while.
I've been teaching for a while, and I recently was reflecting on how much my own practice and teaching has changed since then. And it's ginormous.
Right.
Ginormous. My whole understanding of what yoga is has changed just so drastically. But I think that's the beauty of being on the path, right? It's evolution, right? We are evolving. And as we are evolving, we're tapping into different aspects of yoga and bringing it into our lives. And just when we think we have a handle on it, something will happen, and now we need to call on this aspect of yoga. And thank goodness we have it, because where would we be without it?
Exactly. Oh, that's so good. So thank you for sharing also that you dealt yourself with an eating disorder for 20 years. What does it look like well, first of all, would you like to define what an eating disorder is for anyone who's not sure about that?
Yeah, sure. So, an eating disorder is a mental illness. It's a condition. It's complicated. It's really hard to whenever anybody asks me that, it's hard to answer in one question, and one answer, one sentence, I should say. But it affects people of all ages, of all genders, of all races, socioeconomic backgrounds. It is There's several different types of eating disorders. The most common ones being anorexia and bulimia and binge eating disorder, but there are several others, and the symptoms are based in behaviors with food and excessive or extreme, I should say, extreme negative body image usually. And all of these behaviors and patterns are a way to cope with something painful, whether that's trauma or a painful experience. Integrating social messages that tell us we need to look a certain way can spit out into an eating disorder. So it's really complex. It can be environmental factors, social factors, cultural factors, biological factors, all of these contribute to someone having an eating disorder. Treatment is available and very, very helpful in overcoming an eating disorder. I really believe that recovery is possible. And I also believe that it's an ongoing process. So even as our symptoms may be under control, the growth that continues to happen as we learn to love ourselves, to be kind with ourselves, to nourish ourselves, and all that entails and what that means for someone. I think that's an ongoing process. And, I don't think you have to have an eating disorder to be in that process, right? Like, we're all learning how to love ourselves better, and we all have our obstacles to doing that. And in the case of an eating disorder, it really just plays out in this self-destructive pattern of behaviors, like I mentioned, whether that's, restricting food, whether it's, binging and purging. It comes in all flavors, really. Exercise addictions, addictions to laxatives, anything to numb out. That's really what's going on in the process. Like, how can I numb out this pain?
Mm-hmm.
And food and body become the ways to do it.
Okay, great. Thank you for defining that. And you're right. I think it is super complex. We had Tabitha Farrar on the podcast a while back, and we'll definitely link to that in the show
Great.
notes to go a little more in depth into what maybe the signs and symptoms are. But I'm excited to get into today is really around the language that we could use as yoga teachers, or maybe the language that we might not want to be using.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get there, are we going to see this in our yoga class? Are there people coming to our yoga classes with an eating disorder?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In the United States, the statistic is something like 30 million people are affected. And they're in different phases of the process, whether they're, very sick and deep into their eating disorder, whether they're, freshly out of treatment, whether even if they're 5-10 years into recovery, right? There's all these different phases that take place. And so, yes, absolutely. There are people in our daily yoga classes who are coming to yoga. Maybe they're coming because they're on the other side of treatment and they're looking to incorporate something healthful into their recovery, right? And so, but the other side of that is for people who maybe haven't sought help yet, are really in the thick of it, they might be coming to your yoga class to feed an exercise addiction.
Right.
So
Okay.
just to have an awareness of that. So if you start seeing people coming to your classes, 2-3 times a day, right? Or every day. And there's, that can be just a sign that like, I wonder if this is more than just, they really enjoy being on their mat.
Mm-hmm. What made you decide, okay, yoga will be part of my recovery, or did you make that decision?
It was interesting. So I did struggle with an exercise addiction in the first kind of iteration of the eating disorder back when I was in college. And after I went to treatment and had maybe 2 or 3 years of recovery under me, I really started missing physical activity because I had always been an athlete. Before the eating disorder, I was a basketball player, a rower, a soccer player, a softball player, just part of who I am. Like, I love to sweat, I love to move. I love to be on a team. I was really missing that part of myself. And so this was around the time when yoga was becoming popular and the thing to do. And I remember I was in grad school and I ordered like Baron Baptiste's like power vinyasa videos. And I was doing them in my apartment and ended up meeting someone who knew of a studio nearby who taught Baptiste. I was like, great, I'll try it. So for me, it was like, I wanted to get movement back in my life, but that was completely unrelated to anything I had ever done before. That wasn't putting me on a machine where I was like worried about time and calories burned and all of that. And where I was in an environment that I necessarily wasn't on a team, but I was in a community. And I wanted to check into that. Like, was that something that I could do and it not be, could not turn on all that self-destructive kind of got to work out till I drop mentality.
Right. So can you think of some of the language that maybe you've heard while being in a class that could start to turn that on, that self-destructive, because I just want to say that I think that we all have the ability to speak in a mean way to self, like to
Yes.
be saying like, oh, why are you doing that? Or why can't I look like that person over there?
Yes.
I think that's in 100% of people. But the way you just worded that makes me feel like we as yoga teachers have some responsibility to know what would be triggering. So can you give some examples? You don't have to pick on yoga. It can be any
Yeah,
movement modality as well.
absolutely. And what I want to share here first and foremost is that if you happen to be saying or doing anything that I mentioned, please don't think that you have anything to, I'm not shaming you in any way, right? I see this very much as we are a community of yoga teachers, and conversations like this just help us open our eyes and empower us all. So please know, like, I'm not calling anyone out. Okay. I just need to say that,
Yes.
from the perspective of an eating disorder, but even broader than that, from the perspective of body image, right? Because I think that is the piece that we can all relate to in some way, most likely.
Yeah.
That when we can create a space in the yoga room that is guiding self-discovery, so letting people have their physical sensations, their emotional sensations, but we're not telling them what they need to be, I think then there's an opportunity for people who struggle, whether that's with an eating disorder or just in general body image, a chance to start recognizing themselves in new ways. So here's an example. Like, I know the example I always use, it seems like, is pigeon pose, right? Because it's a really common one. Any hip openers seem to be a common one for us as yoga teachers to kind of be like, you're going to feel it here, right? But I can promise you that there is a percentage of the students in the class who aren't feeling it there.
Right.
Right. So learning to ask questions that guide people into thinking about what are they feeling and where are they feeling it versus telling people what they should feel in their bodies. Because if you're someone who has struggled with body image or an eating disorder and you don't feel what you're being told you should feel, then the script is, once again, my body is wrong.
Okay.
Once again, my body isn't working right. My body isn't as good as hers or his. There's something wrong with my body. Right? And so we don't want to turn people off from coming to yoga. We want people to come and experience the healing and the self-discovery and all the great things that we know are possible, right? So just thinking about letting people have their own experiences, also with hips. Like, we tend to say hips, we store a lot of emotion in our hips and you might cry when you're in pigeon pose and blah, 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 blah. And again, if you do that, I'm not shaming you. This is language that's been passed down
It
from
has
teacher
been.
to teacher, right? These metaphors, like different metaphors, like twists are cleansing, right? We need to think about what we're really saying when we say that. We need to think about what it's implying, right? Because if every time I come to a yoga class and every time I do a twist, I'm being told I'm detoxing, then the implication is that I'm dirty. And
Right.
here we are again. My body's wrong. My body's dirty. My body's not good enough. I need to clean out my body. Right. And so, again, if that metaphor or imagery works for you, okay, but these are just opportunities to think about, places to think about. If we're telling people they should be crying in hip openers, but they're not, they might be feeling like something's wrong with me and my body, or something's wrong with me in my emotional capacity. Here I am again, like I'm totally, I'm just not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, this is
Whereas
so
if we say, so where are you feeling? Notice where you're feeling sensation. Where do you feel it? How do you breathe when you feel that sensation? Questions like that put people inside, and then now there's a new connection forming with their bodies.
Yeah. Oh, this is so good. What I really like about what you just said is two pieces of this that we don't know the story that's going on with the yoga student in our class. I loved how you used the example of detox. I've never thought of it that way.
Mm.
I've most definitely been in yoga classes where that has been said. And I feel like long ago, I would have repeated something like that I had heard from a teacher of mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I say something more about that?
Yeah.
So, and again, it's not that we don't necessarily have to take that word out, but it would be interesting that if you do use that word, to do some research and educate the students on what exactly you mean by detox, right? Because there is a detoxing process that happens 24 hours a day,
Right.
right? So whereas we're just kind of spinning kind of like language that we hear and read everywhere, detox, 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 if we want to use that language, let's make it empowering and educate our students on what's actually happening in their bodies and what it means. Because it's, I often think like, so I go to a yoga class and I twist and I detox. And then I go across the street and I get a smoothie and the name of the smoothie is something detox. And then I go to the grocery store and I stand in line and on the cover of the magazines is about a detox. So it's like, when that happens, because that language of detoxing and cleansing is really prevalent, what's happening then is we're just reiterating the same, I want to curse right now, but the same problematic messages around our bodies being wrong and needing to be cleaned out. We're just duplicating that in the yoga room. So if you want to use that language, educate about what you're really talking about in terms of detoxing and how it's different than these social messages that our bodies need to be cleaned out.
Right. Oh, this is good. And I also like to bring it back to, you said, asking our students so often, especially with newer students will turn to me and say, where should I be feeling this? And I turn to them and say, where are you feeling this?
Good. Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's all about that inquiry, right? I mean, that's so powerful. We are trained to want people to just give us the answers, right? We
Yes.
live in that immediate gratification world. And yoga is about like slowing it down and noticing, where are you feeling that? What is that sensation? How are you breathing when you feel that? What are you thinking about? What is your internal script about when you're standing in warrior one? Where's guilt showing up? Where's shame showing up? Where's comparison showing up? What ways are you connecting to compassion? Where is there room for more kindness in your yoga practice? I think these are all so important ways that we can help people to connect with their bodies without telling them how to do it.
Right. What about last night? I was teaching a group of women about pelvic health. It wasn't a yoga class, but we were doing some yoga things. And two of the things was noticing at the belly, like holding onto the belly, noticing if the breath is there. And then we did another movement. And I took a little moment to say, like, let's all really send some love to our abdomen, to our belly,
Mhm.
especially if you have some thoughts. And then I thought, I don't know if I'm doing this justice. Like, there's a whole thing around love your body, but then it's hard to do sometimes.
Yeah. And I think there's two things I like to say about that. One is that remembering that we are no different than our students in that way. And that when we can teach from that very authentic place, with that very authentic voice of just that knowing that it's challenging to love ourselves. And to always remember that it is a privilege to teach yoga, that it is a privilege to ask people to be in a room with strangers and move their bodies in weird ways, right? It is a privilege to do that work. And when we can be in that authentic space of knowing how challenging it can be, our words will be they'll come from such a real place, you know?
Right.
So I don't think we need to solve the problem for them on that. I think we need to just be in connection with them about it,
Right.
and be committed to doing our own personal work.
Right.
You know?
Okay. Because maybe then last night I said, let's hold on to the belly, notice if the breath is there. We had done it with the ribs and everywhere else. And then I just got this feeling like, all right, if we're having some judgment here of the belly, let's just,
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to be honest, you said my word that I'm always just like, stop saying belly. So I do a whole training on kind of language around and teaching. And one of the kind of parts of that training is around body parts.
right, calling them.
And I ask people, I'm like, I don't prescribe any language. I just say, I'm like, so, what are some cues or words that when you hear in class that kind of really kind of push your buttons? And the number one is belly,
Yes.
because it's such a sensitive area, and it's a part of our body that is always being told it has to shrink and be tamed and not exist, right? And so certainly, in the work that I do with my eating disorder clients, I would never, ever say that word. And I've just stopped using it in class. And even when I describe any type of anatomy, which I do as sparingly as possible, actually, I'll say upper leg and lower leg instead of thigh. For belly, I say center. I do a lot
Oh,
like draw in through center. I do a lot of leading movement from heart. So lift with your, in cat cow, I say, lift your eyes, lift your heart, round your back, tuck your chin, press the back of your heart to the ceiling. So I do a lot of that, trying to just let people be in their bodies without making them feel self-conscious about their body parts. Now that's not to say we shouldn't be paying attention to anatomy. It's very, very, it's our number one priority, right? To keep people safe, especially when we're working with beginners, we need those words. But I think that as a community, it's an opportunity to get creative around how we can guide movement and find new ways to talk about parts of the body.
so would you say bring hands to center, or would you say bring hands to your abdomen? Center, I really like. I never thought of that. It really is the center of the body there.
Yeah, I say that word works for me, but I would say to you and anyone who's listening, find the language that resonates with you most authentically, you know?
Because you even changed thigh, and I can see why. Because
Right.
we hear thigh master, thighs,
People are
thigh
really
gap.
sensitive about these parts of their bodies.
Yes.
I mean, it's a real thing. And I think that just having an awareness and a respect for that reality as teachers, right? Just holding that and knowing that it's there. And yes, this language has been passed down to us. And yes, we need to learn it in order to grow into our teaching. But I think as we evolve and we feel more comfortable in the room, we're comfortable with ourselves as teachers, there's an opportunity to just empower yourself to get creative and find new ways to talk about the body.
Right. Oh, you've got my mind spinning now.
Yeah, like
And
I'll never say.
I'm going to look at how, because that's probably why all of a sudden I felt a little something last night when I was leading that. When
Mhm.
it, it's
Okay.
the energy of the room, and yeah, I've grown to love my belly. So, but not everyone has.
Yeah. So, it doesn't mean you should never ever say the word. And I don't want you to change your teaching if that is the word that feels right to you, right? It's just having that awareness that that might land with several people in the room in a very uncomfortable way.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
I
And
think
so
it's good to question.
as soon as that happens, right? As soon as I hear belly, my mind goes there and a script goes off and I've lost connection with the ground. I've lost connection with my practice, the present moment, because now I'm thinking about everything that's wrong with my belly, what I don't like about it, what I'm going to do to change it. Like now I'm just in like belly mind. I'm not in the room anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And can we save everybody from doing that? No.
Right. Because I was thinking I'm a little sensitive about my toes.
Okay. So there's another piece to this though, right? Like, and here it is. Doing the work around what for you makes you sensitive around your toes. And then from your own awareness, respecting that and teaching mindfully about toes in the yoga room. Right.
Right.
So it's like we got to do our own work and then to make the yoga space as safe as possible, we kind of take our awareness with us and offer new ways to say things.
This is so good. Are there any other verbal cues where you think, I wish yoga teachers would just consider for a moment what this could sound like?
Oh boy. Oh man. A lot of them have to do with the belly,
Because we hear
with
belly
pull
breathing all the
your
time.
belly button to your spine, all that. Just that's just not physically possible anyway. And for people in larger bodies, that is going to feel like they're going to feel so left out.
Right.
Um, there's a lot, but I'm feeling like blocked right now. Like I can't quite.
Well, here's another one. I know I teach I teach people how to find the bony pelvis because
Mhm.
I focus a lot around pelvic anatomy and figuring out like where the attachment of the pelvic floor
Cool.
is.
That's cool.
But as soon as we get near the sits bones or even the hips, like the top of the pelvis, then people will say, "Well, I can't find it." What they're saying is, "I feel like I have too much fluff there."
Exactly. And so those cues that are kind of like remove the excess flesh and, you know, those types of things. Flesh, I would never say the word flesh ever. Right.
Right.
But again, I want to just own that I'm coming from a very sensitive place. I'm coming from someone who's, in recovery from an eating disorder. So my body, what I remember and in my time with dealing with intense body image, it might be on the extreme side of things. So what I just want to own that. And I know that. Um,
I think it's pretty prevalent.
but I do. Okay, thank you. Okay, good.
I
But I
think
think that the body image piece is so prevalent. Like, I think whenever it comes to our bottom halves, it's really sensitive.
Mhm. And also, I wonder if after doing yoga for years, if we also become accustomed to or we're sort of doing the work and maybe we forget what it's like to be that beginner
Yeah.
in a yoga class.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I love talking with people about like their movement history, so like especially teachers, right? Because for us, this is simple. Movement is simple. I mean, I'm generalizing, obviously, but we don't think twice about getting on our mat and moving and breathing and taking up space and, trying new things. But we can all probably remember a time in our lives when we had a movement experience that we felt self-conscious, right? Whether that was trying something new, maybe it was our first time doing yoga, maybe it was something that happened as far back as grade school on the playground, right? I think we need to stay humble to that, we can remember what it feels like to be self-conscious. And maybe in the movement space, we don't feel it, but there probably are places in our lives where we do. It could be with certain family members. It could be when we go to the doctors. It could be when we're in the grocery store. It could be in our homes. Like it could be when we try on clothes. Like there are spaces in our life where that stuff gets turned on, and just remembering that and honoring it and doing our work on it and bringing compassion to it and knowing that the people in our classes are dealing with it too.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the best practices and your book is called Body Mindful Yoga. And I'm curious to know about the wording. Like, what about this whole idea around love your body? Or I feel like there's a reason why you called it Body Mindful Yoga. Do you want to talk to us about that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, body mindfulness means exactly what it sounds like, right? To be mindful of our bodies. And the book really focuses in on language and the relationship between body image and language, and how the way we receive words, use words, our inner dialogue, our conversations, the way we integrate social messages, how all that language translates into how we're feeling about our bodies. Right? So to be body mindful is to be mindful of the language that we're using when we are talking about our bodies, talking about other people's bodies, in our inner dialogues, in our conversations, right? So, which is very different than just this like blanket love your body.
Right.
Right. This is about creating a practice toward mindfulness around how you are speaking about your body, and how can we call on our yoga practices to help us find more affirming language in our life.
Can you give us an example of that?
Mm-hmm. So in the book, we look at 4 different facets of society: food culture, fitness, social media, and fashion. And we look
Wow.
at some of the discourses that that run through those areas of our society. So for example, in the food chapter, we talk about morality language, all the morality language that's been mapped onto food, right? Good, bad, guilty, sinful, right?
Healthy. Yeah.
All of it, all of that. And then we look at a few popular slogans or expressions, and we kind of debunk them. We kind of explain what they actually really mean. And then we offer some journaling exercises to get readers to explore if that language pushes their button in some way, if they have some type of visceral response, if it turns on guilt or shame. And if it does, here's some journaling exercises to help you understand why, like what's driving that, right? Because once we can understand why we're reacting to something, then we have an opportunity to react differently, right? And then offer some ways to think about how can we take this reaction and convert it into creating something more affirming in our language toward ourselves. Maybe that's a mantra or an expression or some type of language. And then we, in the second half of the book, are different types of yoga practices. So there's asana practices, breathing practices, auditory practices, visual practices. So depending on what your preference is, on how you like to learn or what you enjoy, there's a variety of practices. And there are ways to kind of wire in that new affirming language, because it's not a matter of like, okay, I'm going to say something nice to myself and I'm never going to, and like, now I'm done. Right. I'm just going to say something nice to myself and I'm done now. It's all good.
Right.
No, it's a practice, right? It's a practice. We need to be practicing, and we need to be, consistently working on wiring in new language. And then we need to model it in the world. So we need to practice not talking self-disparagingly about ourselves.
Right.
We need to model that. And as we model that for others, right, we are building up our own body mindfulness, our own, self-empowering resources. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it might just start with noticing when that negative self-talk is coming in, noticing it, and really making an effort to practice refraining from it.
This brings to mind right away this memory that I have from when I was very young. A friend of mine stood in the mirror and we were little kids, and she was like, "Oh, I look so fat."
Oh,
And I had never had that modeled, but I am certain that's where it came from with her, is that she had a mother who I can't say I'm certain. That's my feeling. I just feel like we were little kids and we didn't even think about that yet.
yeah.
And so that's where that message could come from, and we wouldn't even it wouldn't even be it would just be modeled for us.
Right. And yeah. And so these messages are modeled in our families, they're modeled, in our peer groups, they're modeled in our social messaging, our cultural messaging. And so it's a tough world, it's a tough world to navigate from a place of self-empowerment. But I really believe and practice in my own life, and that's why I believe it, is that when we can realize that we have so much power in our words.
Right.
There's so much power in our words, right? And that when we can really become mindful of how our words are, hurting ourselves, hurting others, perpetuating guilt about our bodies, shame, driving comparison, we can realize that that language is playing into that. It's a starting point for making a shift.
Mm-hmm.
And so body mindful yoga is really, designed to help people find that starting point of, okay, what's my relationship with my body like right now? What are some of the influences that have made it that way? Where is there an opportunity to shift, to bring a little more kindness? And here are some practices to help you do that.
That's amazing. I like how you said this is a practice and it's not just something we do and then it's mastered and then it's done and
No,
on we go.
no, no, no. And I really believe though too, it's taking the time to understand why these words irritate us on such deep levels, like why they have so much power to turn on such reactions, you know? And so, part of the book is that self-study. That's self-study of yoga piece.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first half. And then the second half is more practice oriented.
So you said it was food, fitness, social media is in there,
and fashion.
fashion. It's so true. It's so prevalent everywhere. We went to the store the other day with my daughter who's 14 and my son was there. He's 16. And we walk in and there's this logo everywhere that says work your butt off. And he goes, "Why does it say work your butt off everywhere?" And she says, "It's just a saying." you know. And he's like, "But what? Who would want to literally work their butt off?"
Well, you're very, very smart, wise kids.
Yeah.
That could have been a different family who saw that. And depending on what the messages were at home or what's going on there, that message could have really done some damage, or at least I should say the way the message was received could have done some damage.
Right. Yeah. It's like so I mean, I do ask my kids a lot to kind of be on guard with marketing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much online. Like, no, you can't believe that you can buy that thing and it's going to do all of these things.
Right.
They need to be discerning with the marketing message for sure. And we talk
Yeah.
about that. Uh,
Yeah, totally. And when it comes to marketing around, our bodies, it's so important. It's so important that we can look at that and see through it and not take it in.
who did you write your book for?
So my co-author, Robbie Butera, we wrote it. We wrote it for people who are looking to feel more confident in themselves. We wrote it with the intention of it being a resource for a lot of different groups. The general reader, people studying yoga, therapists, and other mental health professionals. General yoga practitioners. I guess it's kind of a broad audience, but our conversation validated that, body image affects a lot of us, all of us really on some level. So yeah, the specifics to teaching yoga are not in this book, but I do offer trainings and hopefully soon there'll be some online resources for that.
Good. And I see that you also do mentorship for healthcare professionals or yoga teachers.
I do. Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. I mentor teachers, mental health professionals, other yoga therapists who want to work with clients who struggle with eating disorders and body image. And I mentor them in kind of learning the nuances of doing that work, because it's very different than what we learn in our 200-hour training, even our 500-hour training. So it's education on eating disorders, research on eating disorders, the nuances of working with that population, and also some of the interpersonal work on, so what's your intention for doing this work?
Right.
What are some of the anxieties you're bumping up against maybe working with this population? So there's that piece. And then whatever their specific career goals are, I help support them in bringing that vision to life.
That's amazing. Do you think this is a book that you could buy for someone else, or would it offend someone, or would it just be a welcome gift?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that before. It's written from a very compassionate standpoint and a very gentle voice. So I'm hopeful that if it was purchased as a gift, that it would be well received.
Yeah, I think so. I think it would if you look at it. And also, is there an age for it? We know that eating disorders isn't just something that affects, men or women or just this particular age, even though there is I feel like there's too many messages that say that it is just women, or it's just like young women or something, but it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that there's an age where you would say, what would it be like if this was reading in some grade in public school? What age do you think it would be perfect for?
Wow. Well, I think with the social media aspect in it there, and maybe middle school, maybe high school.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's coming to me right now. Certainly college.
I remember thinking like I'm perfect up until about the age 11. And I was like, oh, I have flaws?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Right. So can you imagine if everyone had resources or a supportful resource that was saying, it's not a flaw. This is something that's unique about you.
Right.
Like, go shine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, go own it.
Yeah. Oh, my parents were pretty good at doing that.
That's
but
great.
still, there's
That's
always
so great.
that.
Yeah.
I wonder what the root of that inner critic is. Like, why is it there? What purpose did it serve? It must have served a purpose at some point. We didn't just invent this to have it. Usually everything's about survival.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any ideas?
Well, I think from the yoga standpoint, it's ego.
Aha.
Right. And when we can get quiet enough to discern the difference between ego and reality, when we can kind of be like, oh, there's that thought again, but I'm not that thought. Okay, I'm going to let it go. Right? Which is a very different experience than there's that thought again. Crap. All right. I'm awful. I'm so disgusting. I'm not good enough. And then that's just a snowball effect.
Right. What would you like to say to anyone, doesn't have to be a yoga student or yoga teacher, anyone who feels like they are having a point in their life where they're not feeling confident in their body? Is there something that you would like to share with them?
I just would like to offer hope. I'd like to offer hope in that, you're not alone in that feeling. And I know how isolating it can feel and be. You're not alone in that, and that, you deserve to find a like-minded community or a friend or a trusted therapist or some type of professional to share how you're feeling, right? Because holding it in, those feelings of shame and guilt and comparison and despair and all that, they're so heavy. Those feelings are so heavy. And when we're feeling heavy in our bodies, those feelings only make it feel heavier.
Right.
So we need to be, or I should say, you deserve to share how you're feeling and allow support.
Right. We have so many other emotions that we're allowed to share.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Maybe we're a little less, like we can share when we're sad or grieving the loss of something.
Absolutely.
But we're not encouraged as much to share maybe feelings of like, it might get shoved aside like, oh, well, you're pretty. Keep going.
Right. Right. And on the inside, you're feeling so inadequate and incompetent and wrong. Right.
Mm.
So giving yourself space to air that out, to do that work and find a little freedom. You deserve it.
Thank you for that. If people want to get your book, where do they get your book? And also, you're touring around and talking to people about your book. Do you want to tell us about both of those?
Yeah, thank you. The book's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, my publisher, Llewellyn, worldwide. And I've heard that it's even being sold on Target.com. So there you go.
Yay.
I am touring around. Actually, I'm going to be in Los Angeles, Montreal, Portland, Miami, a couple other places. All of my events are listed on my website. And, if you're listening and you live in any of the areas that I'm going to be, I would absolutely love, love, love to meet you. Feel free to reach out and come to an event or meet up for coffee, something. I'd just love to connect.
Great. We will put a link to your website in the show notes. And what is your website?
It's yoga, 4, eatingdisorders.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Well, connected yoga teachers, how is listening to that? Are you like me where you had a cue that you often use, like saying belly? Jennifer really made me think about replacing the word belly with center. I love that. One other thing that I started to do after I talked with Jennifer is saying lie down on your abdomen. People generally know where their abdomen is, or lie down face first on the floor. So there are many ways that I have looked at changing that cue in my own class. And you could sense in the episode that I had some discomfort with it in a class. And no blame or shame around this if you have used a cue that Jennifer talked about. Also, one of my key takeaways was when Jennifer talked about, instead of telling our students where they will feel a pose, ask questions so that students really feel empowered to trust that they are right in what they are experiencing in a yoga pose. So often students turn to me and I see them look at me and say, where should I be feeling this? And that's the time where I've often done this. And I feel like Jennifer added a whole other layer to this around how we view our bodies, that's where I often will go over to students and say, where are you feeling this? Asking questions instead of feeling like you have all of the answers. That's been a learning process with me as a yoga teacher. And I want to say also that sometimes students want the answer right away. Jennifer also brought in questioning the cues that have been passed down. So I continue to do this. I want teachers and students to also question the cues that I pass down as well. I like how Jennifer said that belly button to spine, it's not even a possible thing. So why are we cueing that? Also, this whole thing of love your body, we can't just say love your body and then it happens. I love how Jennifer said it's a practice to be mindful and to use new language to self and to others. That it's this thing that we might not master and feel like, oh yes, I completely love my body, but that it's a practice that we can do. There's one quote from Jennifer's book that I really love. Change your language to heal your relationship with your body. And I do wonder still, why do we have an inner critic? I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Connected Yoga teachers. Any cues that you use now, you have changed since listening to this episode, or you've thought of, or a cue that maybe you felt self-conscious or brought you right out of your yoga practice and into another place where you didn't really want to hang out, where you were being more critical of your body. Tell us about those experiences so that we can all learn together. So you can post that in the show notes. Just go to the connectedyogateacher.com/126. If you want to dive in and learn more about eating disorders, we did an episode with yoga teacher and eating disorder expert Tabitha Farrar back in episode 48. And if you have not listened to Tabitha's podcast, I highly suggest you go and check it out. Tabitha has some amazing information there. And because she's a yoga teacher, she also can look at it from the lens of fitness, yoga, and just general. She understands yoga and also really understands eating disorders. So go back and have a listen to that by going to the connectedyogateacher.com/48. At the time that I am recording this, Connected Yoga Teachers, there are a couple of spots open in the Yoga for Pelvic Health in Meaford, Ontario, November 2nd and 3rd, 2019. All of the details are on the connectedyogateacher.com website under trainings and events. And since this happens in November, and that's when it starts to get cold and snowy here in Canada, at this point, I don't have plans to travel away and share this training somewhere else. But if you have a warm and sunny location and you want me to bring this training to you or to your studio, and you have a group of people, it's a 2-day training, it's 20 hours, and it's all of the basics for yoga for pelvic health. All of the basics in a way that you can take this information and apply it to different breath practices and poses, and really have an understanding of how you can best serve your students in regards to pelvic health. Thank you so much to our Connected Yoga teacher team, Samantha, Suzanne, Crunch, and Cindy, for making today's episode possible. And thank you, dear yoga teacher. You are out there doing the real work. Please do not dismiss yourself as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, and as a professional. These are huge things for yoga teachers to be able to see. As a collective, we will be able to see our value as a professional and serve our community in a whole new way. So please be gentle with yourself this week, be kind to yourself, and stay connected to yourself, to your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up.